crime lab issues. I guess by way of update on this matter, by the way, Sheriff Meyer had called. He said he was unable to attend today's meeting. I know that, again, we've had conversations at our last several meetings. Again, there's so much blurring whether they're executive meetings. We also have a small crime lab committee and so forth. But the conversation has been, and of course the Chief of Police Association made the recommendation, and most of them are taking their work to ECI, with regard to DNA issues. Chief Pomeski, I thought he would be here today also because he's the president. But between he and George, I thought one of them could report on that. But we do have a meeting scheduled with the crime lab, I believe, for August 26th at Richfield. The sheriff scheduled that. We wanted to discuss with them more details and more issues associated with the potential future of our crime lab's DNA section and our relationship with ECI with regard to their DNA section. That being everything else, I think is part.
We have a meeting tomorrow also.
And before you walked in today, we just decided that we would cancel tomorrow's meeting. The chief is ill, the camp's chief is ill, and of course Warren's also indisposed. And so as a result of that, we thought we would reschedule that. So if you could please free your calendar up for that 10 o'clock meeting that we have scheduled tomorrow. We'll just discuss that. Of course, underlying many of the discussions we've had, goes to the issue of control and operations and oversight at the crime lab. The mayor and I were able to have a meeting early this week in which we discussed this matter, and I guess at this point, Mayor, I'll turn that issue over to you.
Well, thank you. Yeah, we had talked about the operations as the last several months have been trying to figure out the direction we're going with the funding and management and so on. But the overriding issue is the oversight, because of the structure is it's a city department, but it's servicing the county through SCOG and all the partners. And I think, in discussion with this, I talked about collaborating several months ago when I met with this main board about collaborating with this board and making sure that we reference with you in reference to posting for positions and interviews and those types of things before we take action. But I think we really need to take kind of a bigger leap in reference to the direction we should go. When Tom and I were speaking about this, we're the city of Canton, although we're a big player in this, we're still just part of it. And as the mayor of Canton, I'm represented, voted by the people of the city of Canton, not countywide. And this organization is definitely a countywide structure. So what I was going to be offering today, and I listed it as a motion, although I'm not a member here, so I don't know if I can do a motion.
I think, again, yeah, I think
somebody can move the motion.
Yeah, go ahead and read that.
I'll read this as a motion in reference to a direction to take in order to make it a little bit more clarity and who is in charge, who the director reports to, how the system can work and what role the city is playing, since they are technically city employees and through our appointed authority. But I'm making a motion, or would ask somebody to actually move this motion, under the belief that the crime lab is a countywide function as opposed to a city of Canton function, and that therefore SCOG is the most appropriate agency to oversee the overall operations of crime lab. I move to authorize the chairperson of SCOG to develop a contract between SCOG and the city of Canton to accomplish the following general principles. First, all day-to-day operations and the direct supervision of the crime lab and employees of the crime lab shall be within the authority of SCOG. Second, for SCOG, shall interview, recommend the hiring of all employees in the crime lab. All disciplinary matters shall be similarly reviewed and recommended by SCOG. Canton shall remain the appointed authority by statute, but agrees to employ only employees recommended by SCOG and to initiate discipline action only as recommended by SCOG. So we would be kind of a pass-through on authority. Canton shall continue to provide payroll, legal defense, and other administrative services to the crime lab currently as provided. Employees of the crime lab shall continue to be City of Canton employees for the purposes of RC Chapter 2744, immunity and indemnification, and for all employee benefits. And the City of Canton shall provide leasehold space to the crime lab at the Canton Water Reclamation Facility as it currently exists for no additional consideration. And the funding of the crime lab shall continue under the existing local government funding agreement. those are the outlines that we had. Essentially, technically, it would still be overseen or run through the city's technical processes, but SCOG would be the management oversight and act as the appointing authority, and then we would have to sign it and pass it through. I think that creates a lot more clarity in reference to who the directors they should be responding to. We've had our police department oversee it, we've had safety oversee it, we've had different individuals, and it's really kind of a gray area as we've been exposed to how this is unfolding. So to me, this would clear it all up, and because the expectations are that there's potential, obviously changes today, but potential changes in the future, depending on what the governor and the legislature does on local government funding and other concerns we have out there. I think this needs to be decided by the representatives of the county representing SCOG, not a city making a decision or having that weighted influence. I think we should have our normally weighted influence, not an unbalanced influence. So anyway, that's the outline that I put together. I have a copy of this I'll send down to you as chairman. If you guys want to discuss this, the chairman and I had a long conversation in reference to what we thought would make the most sense for the purposes of what SCOG is, a county-wide representation for the crime lab. We think this is a better way to go, and still would not create major changes in the structure, the funding, the employee's status. They would have security in reference to stay in the same benefit package and longevity and so on that they have. So that's the gist of this.
And for purposes of discussion, then I would entertain, the mayor not being a member of the executive board, I would entertain a motion from the executive board to this effect.
So moved as herein attached.
I'll second.
A motion, a second. Discussion, this is, and Chris Bates from the law department, she and I had a conversation about this today and yesterday, but we've also had previous conversations on many occasions, and that is, whether crime lab employees can become SCOG employees and different things. And this is really a relatively complex, legal issue that involves a lot of confusion. It's just not easy, for example, to transfer full and absolute authority to SCOG, and yet the city can't remain the appointing authority. And by statute, they are the appointing authority, and that does have some meaning. So we're going to have to, work further on language and so forth. But again, the idea is for SCOG to have the direct and immediate oversight and management of this entity. Any actual actions would have to be taken, though, at the direction of the mayor or safety director with regard to appointing people. But again, this provides that they would only appoint people that would be recommended by SCOG. Of course, the city of Canton is a member of SCOG, and you're going to be sitting at the table with an approximate 35% vote on any issues associated with such matters. The same thing with regard to discipline. So we tried to frame this in a way that probably maintains the stability of the organization with regards to its employees being employees of the city of Canton. It provides the indemnification, it provides the payroll structure which is in place. We in SCOG really aren't yet prepared to take on all of those issues administratively, or legally. Maybe sometime in the future we may, and this may turn out to be an interim step. But we think that this is probably the best step. But Chris, maybe you might touch upon, I think particularly the appointing authority issue is probably the most central one that we need to talk to. But it's the same issue that the city of Elias would have, or any of other political subdivisions where you have to see appointing authority for someone.
Yes, correct. And basically, I think the easiest way to think about this is that the city of Canton will be entering into basically a management agreement with SCOG. And SCOG is going to be managing the crime lab in many ways for the city. And that's going to bring, I think, a lot of comfort to the executive board that there's going to be a lot of involvement. You're going to basically managing this. You're going to be interviewing employees, recommending hiring, and having all that type of input. The only thing that the city cannot do, and I talked to the mayor, who is my client, really in this regard, is we are the appointing authority of our folks at the crime lab. We cannot, by law, give that away. That doesn't mean we can't agree to exercise that authority in a contractual manner like this. We can't do that. We just simply, like I said, if someone needs to be disciplined, if someone needs to be hired, those things at the final step have to be done by either the mayor or the safety director or whatever. But they are going to agree contractually to do it only with input from your board as you see fit. So that's, I think, going to provide both sides with some solace. And that way, we also will have uninterrupted civil service and other types of things for our employees. And of course, all of this will have to be done under the umbrella. You know, we are a civil service city, all right? And we do have collective bargaining agreements in place. We don't have any union employees there now, but we have had in the past a clerical staff. So we have certain things we still will have to abide by. And SCOG will also have to abide by it as the managing partner. But those are all things that we can do. So I think this is actually a very good, very feasible way to do this and accomplish, I think, what both sides would like to see. So it's legally, we can do this.
And I'd like to add, too, that the history of SCOG, the city of Canton had a rotating leadership position with SCOG, and I think the board can discuss that in the future, how we handle that. But it did create a scenario when the city represented the chairmanship, the lead role on the board, and also was the appointing authority in addition to that. So you had, our prior safety director was acting on his position as the board chair as well as his position as the appointing authority, and made decisions that created a scenario where the board necessarily, the entire board wasn't necessarily agreed on everything because it was his role on two levels to handle. So I think by having a management agreement, it kind of sets the stage for, even if we do have a chairman that's working in the city of Canton, that the board is going to be consulted on a board level before it comes to the city for a decision to be made. And I think that's the kind of a check and balance that needs to be put in place to avoid the city having a lopsided role in leadership on this thing, which is kind of how some of this came about.
Questions, comments?
Of course. Day-to-day operations. And how, I'm trying to think
there's a lot of work.
procedurally how that's going to work. I mean, she has a question, or whoever is running the crime line has a question, who do they call? And are we going to have to do this by committee?
I mean, we obviously have to do work on our side and ascertain how we best want to structure this. And again, I think there's several different ways that we can do it. I mean, obviously, I don't think with day-to-day issues that there's a need to call the executive committee together on that kind of a basis. So I think that we're going to have to probably, delegate, in some way, shape, or form to myself, to Don, or to someone else.
Well, I'm fine with that.
In some capacity, yeah.
And that's the issue that we have right now,
out.
is we have day-to-day operations, but we don't necessarily consult with the board on every action. So, this way the board can determine who's going to be that person that's going to be the head or on it. And by contract, everybody's going to know. It could be an individual or, but I really would recommend against day-to-day operations being run by committee.
Oh, I don't agree with that either. I'm raising the question that says all day-to-day operations for the crime line will be the authority of SCOG. SCOG is a committee.
Yeah, and SCOG needs to have an acting authority.
Who was that?
And his motion says that he's authorizing me to develop the contract and the develop concept.
Yeah, this is the final stage.
Our side of it, then we have to figure out how we would make them work, in order to actually have day-to-day hands-on supervision to the extent necessary. Again, remember, we have a department head there, being an interim department head here.
Right.
We have a department head that, most issues, can be worked out within their capacity and so forth, but day-to-day, but it's to the point where you have an issue, whether it happens 2 times a day or 1 time a week or something, you need somebody to call, and now this is saying that you call somebody at SCOG as opposed to calling the chief of safety or the safety director or whatever.
And SCOG may decide that they want one of those two to be that point person, but I think it needs to be done by the decision of the committee.
We will need to amend our bylaws, I would assume.
I think we need to, I think that we'll probably, I think we can do this contractually, maybe without amending our bylaws. We need to deal, we're still going to keep, I think, our Police Chiefs Association and your law enforcement committee in place, but I think that we need to, at least from my perspective as chairperson, I think that we need to amend everything and take a new look at everything in view of what we're trying to do with dispatch and in view of what we're doing with this and in view of everybody's input. Obviously, one of the things we've already done was to greatly, enlarge the size of the executive committee just to get more input from, everybody in the county. I think that's very, very important. There's some other things that I've thought of along the way. I think that we need to re-examine how we do some of these other things. We probably need to deal with the situation. And one of the things that I've noticed, by the way, is we have a provision in there now where the chairmanship of this entity, rotates, every 2 years between the city of Canton and the Stark County. And I don't think that that's appropriate, actually. I think it's up to the membership of SCOG to probably elect the person, and it may be for a 2-year term as opposed to a 1-year term, but to elect the person that they think is most capable and most interested, by the way, on the interest of Stark Council of Governments, by the way, to serve as chairperson as opposed to either the safety director of the city of Canton or the president of the board of county commissioners. So I think that's another area that I would like to see changed, and it's either to my benefit or detriment, but I just think it's a fairer way for this entity to start to operate. We have rules in place, by the way, which were started in 1989, and again, as I've indicated before,
That's the way it's always been.
I know, I drafted it, yeah. Yeah, and Bob and I actually wrote those things, and my initials were on the draft of those things, so that's how we started this thing, but I don't think it's always worked to the best by doing that. I just think we have to change some things, and really, I think what we really are seeking is more input from the townships and more input from all the other municipalities in this whole thing.
I think this also, because we're already kind of knee-deep in this crime lab transition, for the past several months, and this is an opportunity for us to kind of look at this and figure out how we want to operate as SCOG on a joint entity. Because if the dispatch comes around and we're able to make this happen and we bring it to SCOG, this allows us to kind of set a template on how we want to handle that. And this is a smaller operation, but. Calm down. We're talking positive about it.
I was waiting to see if you're going to follow your chair. Wow.
Yeah, but the reality is if we do that and we want to have a similar operation, this could allow us to set the template on how that will play out, and literally could fast track that in reference to all this stuff being off the board in reference to this process. So I think it's important we address this now and then potentially consider as we do it that it would be the model we use as we look at the dispatch process.
Chrissy, and you said that the city will provide legal defense for the employees of the crime line, since they're city employees. I guess my question, since we are the supervisor of those employees, if the employee gets sued, we're going to get sued. We have insurance.
Yes, we do. We do insurance.
Right, and that's a very good question, because I have to tell you, as a management contract, okay, it's my feeling that the city would only represent the employees and not SCOG. They're not our client, and that insurance would have to provide insurance counsel for you. Doesn't mean we wouldn't all work together, because I'm sure we have the same goal, but it's very similar to a lot of other things. When we have a SWAT operation that's multi-jurisdictional, when we've had other, we have several lawyers that may be involved in a lawsuit. But you're very right. If you decide to manage, you have to understand there's good and bad that comes with that. And if something goes wrong, and we've never had that because we have such wonderful employees at the crime lab, but if something would go wrong, management decisions could certainly be questioned and be pulled into the lawsuit as well. That's just the reality.
John, I would check with our insurance carrier, because now we're getting into a new ballgame.
I will honestly tell you.
We have them, we're
the entire board, I made sure that with the board, the entire board is insured on any lawsuits. They have been for a number of years, but all SCOG, all the members that are involved in this are totally insured through.
Yeah,
but I will show you the policy.
We're entering into a management agreement.
I will check it out.
Our functions are broadening out here. I think it's so
I will make sure.
Covering everything.
Mr. Chairman.
Get a letter to our insurance company.
The motion on the floor is just to come back for a contract. We're not voting we're going to do this. It's just that you're going to draw up a contract, and then we'll vote whether we want to do it or not.
Yes.
I want to be clear about that, because I think what the mayor's just said is, I have to agree with it wholeheartedly. It could lay the groundwork, and I'm not so sure that I actually agree with this, but I think the money should follow the management. I don't know how you separate those two, but I would be glad to look at the contract and see what kind of hybrid you come up with. The other thing that you were talking about, like about changing bylaws, Actually, as a trustee, I served, as you know, 2 years as the chairman of SCOG, so that it was spread around. It
Okay.
used to get spread around. It wasn't just passed back and forth, so we all did share. And largely, the one thing I believe really needs rectified is the fact that Stark County Sheriff is not a member of SCOG. To me, is I don't know how that ever got missed. It's such an integral part of everything that we do, and yet he's not even a member. I think he should be a member of the executive committee. He should be a member of the general committee also.
So, you know, again, of course, we kept Sheriff Meyer involved in this thing. I
Right.
talked to him today in anticipation of this meeting, so much he just was unable to attend these things, but he's been integrally involved in everything we're doing on every front. Key player.
I'm just throwing it out because you're talking about amending bylaws. It would be a good time to add him.
Yep. Marty, I know that you have questions.
Answer them all.
What?
Does this have to go to the general body, or can we just authorize?
Isn't voted yet.
Contract?
Well, we'll start working on this thing immediately, and maybe by the time we get to the general membership meeting, if we have something in place, maybe what we would do would have an executive committee meeting on the same day, you know, since we're all the same people anyways, prior there too, and then have the general membership meeting, if in fact we can get something put together. But Chris promises me that the law department is gonna move on this quickly, and then she will have a full and complete draft by tomorrow.
There's always going to be something that pops up that you're not expecting.
I love how you, tomorrow, go to Key West, but we'll talk about that later.
On your way.
Okay, maybe we
I'll
can
do it on.
Flight time.
We can make a,
I just got back from there actually, so I can tell you have plenty of time to work on this
Hilton Head and Key
contract.
West. We can negotiate in Hilton Head and Key West.
He's got smart.
Okay. Any other questions by anybody? And again, you know, it's a good point. This is a motion just to develop the contract, but we did want to touch upon these specifics because we wanted to, you know, raise that kind of a dialogue and have everybody understand the direction that we're going. You know, the other choice, and again, you know, the choice I think that Randy's thinking about, and again, the alternative is just the wholesale, you know, move and make them, you know, SCOG employees and so forth. And again, you know, akin to the Logic Board. I don't know how the Logic Board started, Randy, and I don't know, did you guys start with dispatchers from other cities who were city employees and
I
absorb
couldn't
them,
tell
or
you
did
that. That's a good question.
Or
I
did you
don't
just
know.
start?
It was
It's
there
a harder
before.
thing, you know, if you were starting anew, that's the way you would
Right.
start.
It was there
Given the
before
history
me.
given the history that we have, it's a little bit more difficult. I mean, you would have to, I don't know, you'd have to, I guess, terminate people's employment and then rehire them, and there'd be other continuity and
Unfortunately,
issues and so forth.
The historian on that passed away. Neil Fitzgerald, the law director, had the biggest history on that. So
I believe they inherited it from another dispatch.
Pardon?
I believe they inherited that from another dispatch unit in the county. However, at one point in time,
Yeah.
they always did their own dispatch, police and fire at one point, years ago, when the boxes.
I think they formed their COG just like you did, though, Tom, when you started this one, same way.
Okay. Any other discussion? Now Marty's got a question.
Well, I'm just trying to
Yeah.
understand what the negative implications of this might be, and I'm not coming up with any in particular, other than that there may be a disconnect between, if we have any actual disciplinary issues to deal with, there may be a disconnect between what SCOG would want to see done and what the city would want to see done, but the city's clearly saying, we'll listen to whatever you have to say, so.
I mean, right now, we have that scenario where the city takes action and SCOG says, wait a second, we don't really want to do that. And-
Exactly.
But what's the rules?
So,
There are none.
I mean, other than that, I'm trying to, in my mind, visualize what, where the negatives are, and of course, it's all the devils are gonna be in the details, so we'll see what the contract looks like, but, you know, authorizing the law department and our executive committee to come up with a contract seems to me to be pretty innocuous. Let's do it, see what we come up with, and then we'll decide whether or not we want to continue.
Let's do it. Okay, no further discussion. I would entertain a vote on the motion. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?